Welcome to the Hutchinson Hive. I'm Mary Hudson, your host, and I am so excited that you're here. This program is meant to tell you about the creators, the makers, the people, the events, and the programs that make Hutchinson so special, because of course you know that there is much in Hutch. We talk with storytellers, and today my guest is a true storyteller. You'll recognize her from print, from the Hutchinson Leader, and now the Hutchinson Station. She is award-winning Kay Johnson. Welcome.
Hey, Mary. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you're here. Now, do you keep a tally mark of how many interviews you've done? Or if you had to guess, any idea? Thousands.
Yeah, literally. So let's see, there's 52 weeks in a year. I've worked more than 30 years. I've done probably 3 or 4 interviews a week, if not more, whatever that adds up to.
Let me take my shoes and socks off quick.
Significant.
Like, it's significant. Okay, so you've been doing this over 30 years. How did you get into journalism or working in the newspaper field?
Well, I was editor of our high school paper.
Okay.
And then my mom and I started collecting wildlife art like Cuba, Terry Redlin, and we thought what the industry needed was a magazine. So my mom and I started the first magazine of wildlife art in the country. And then after 5 years, maybe it was 4, I negotiated the sale of it to Doran Communications, which at that time published Corporate Report Minnesota, Corporate Report Kansas City, Twin Cities, Minnesota Business Journal, a whole bunch of magazines. Okay. And then I joined them as editor of the new magazine called Midwest Art. So that's how I started.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining our show today. That I feel like was a mic drop. I wasn't expecting that.
Well, that's how it started.
That's awesome. Okay. So what do you love about journalism or being a journalist? What is it that keeps you driven?
The next story.
Okay.
Because the process is always the same. And I tend to get bored very, very easy. And so the fact that although I'm writing, which is the same process, the words are always different. The person's always different. The experiences are different. So it's always something new combined with something old.
I love that. So the comfort of, you know, the process, but the story will always be different. No two stories, no two lives are the same. I love that. You know, one of the things I was thinking about as I was preparing for today, I was thinking about how people follow you. People always want to know what Kay's doing next or writing about next. Is there a difference between curious and nosy when it comes to that? Because you're kind of diving into other people's lives a little bit.
I have never been turned down for an interview. So I think I'm not nosy enough, maybe. But I think it's because I'm genuinely interested in people.
Sure.
And it isn't like I want to know your deep, dark secrets. Although sometimes I feel like I am the father confessor.
Yeah.
But typically I'm talking with someone because of an award, recognition, some type of event, something like that. So we already have parameters about what we're going to talk about.
Sure.
And typically that's how it goes. And then, you know, there might be room for, so what do you do when you're not? Or right. That kinds of stuff. So it's always interesting. It's always fun. And it's really not work. So I'm lucky.
You are very lucky. Mm-hmm. When it doesn't feel like it's work. Okay, so I'm really curious, what are your favorite types of stories?
That depends on my mood.
Oh, okay.
And
maybe even seasons of life.
Yeah, I like, I went through a period of time where I was interviewing people who were celebrating their 100th plus birthday. And I don't know how that happened, but there seemed to be a run of them. And it reached the point where I literally said to the person calling, because it was never the 100-year-old person,
right,
It was always the daughter or son or sister-in-law. I finally had to say, exactly what shape is your relative in? Because I literally showed up at places where mom and dad were completely, for lack of a better word, unattached to reality.
Incapacitated.
Yes, there
Yeah.
you go. That's the word.
Not all 100-year-olds end up like Max Engwall.
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly. And I interviewed Max a couple of times. But that's true. And although there were some that were really good and there were some that were good up to a point, but I did find that I needed to ask because it shaped the interview.
Right? Yeah, for sure. So what makes a story worth telling?
You know, that's an interesting thing because everyone has a story, no matter what. There was a fellow I once interviewed. I was desperate for a story. I mean, it typically doesn't happen, but occasionally. And I needed a story, and so at the time, I also worked part-time at the senior center. So I knew a lot of the seniors coming and going. Mm-hmm. There was one fellow who I'd sometimes talk with, and so I sat down with him one day and I said, hey, let's talk about your life. Because I thought that'd be interesting, because I don't think he had ever left McLeod County, actually.
Okay.
And, but what was interesting was his great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, was a paper boy, a newsboy, and was in Ford Theater the night that Lincoln was shot. And that was amazing to me because he actually had a certified letter that was in the family that was passed down and had been certified that this was a true story and that was very cool because I happen to be a Civil War freak, and so.
Oh, absolutely.
And so when he was telling me about it, because his great-great-grandfather was, I want to say 12 or young, very young, and he had left home because his dad had remarried. And so he was literally living on the street and selling newspapers to kind of bring in a couple of bucks, or maybe a couple of cents back then.
Right.
And he was in Ford Theater, and so he was there the night Lincoln was shot, and I was really shocked.
Right.
Yeah, that
Wasn't
was
the conversation you thought you were going to sit down to?
Yeah, and then another one I had that I thought was really, really interesting was a fellow in Glencoe, and he was going to be presenting a wreath during the Memorial Day service. And I just happened to connect with him somehow, and I thought, well, that'll be interesting. And he proceeded to tell me that he had been a paratrooper at D-Day and had parachuted in, and I forget which, in one of the French towns near the coast, and all the stuff that had happened. And I had been searching for years for a D-Day person, and I never could find one. And here literally walked in, and so then later on, my brother-in-law at the time, Jim Lauer, was a Veteran Services Officer, and he knew him. So Jim came along because, and I can't think of his name now, but he had been a member of the 101st Airborne, and Jim was of the 101st Airborne. So he came along, and the two of them talked military, and I took notes, and it was very cool because what was interesting is the process of, putting on a parachute and jumping out of a plane hadn't changed that much. It was the same process that Jim followed.
When he did that in D-Day, when Jim was doing it in a very different time in the world, right?
Yes, because Jim was at the, when the Middle East, the first Middle East run around, and he was ran the flight line in Baghdad. And then Jim's big claim was that Rivera, what's his name, the reporter.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, was trying to get in, and so he had to deal with Jim. And my brother-in-law, no is no, and that's just it. And this reporter tried to give him an autographed picture.
Oh, like that was going to do it for him?
Yeah.
Geraldo Rivera?
Yeah,
Probably, because he thought he could get anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
That's
you don't
great.
you don't give Jim an autographed picture and think you're getting on the flight line. Doesn't happen. And so that was an interesting story. But so yeah, you never know when a story is going to be a great story.
Right. So now, as we think about all these stories and all the people that you've met, these obviously are resonating as we're starting to talk about them. What's something that like really resonated with you or comes to mind right away as the big story, or something that, you know, just kind of changed maybe people's lives or your life?
Well, it was interesting. My sister Lynn and I went to a concert at the Dassel History Center. We walked in and you know, people are sitting at tables and stuff. And there was a woman sitting at a table, and we asked if we could join her, and she was gracious and said yes. And we introduced ourselves, and she said, "Oh, I remember when you interviewed us, and I wrote a story about her brother, and I can't think if he had passed away or if I don't remember what the circumstances were, but the story was so important that they all had copies, they all carried them, they shared them. I mean, this was, I don't know, many years ago I wrote this, and she still knew all about it and was really gracious and wonderful, and that was cool because at the time I had to think about it and think, I wonder what story that was.
Right, yeah, but to somebody else it was very important.
Yeah, and that's not all that uncommon. When I used to do the Slice of Life story in the Leader, we had people buying 30, 40 copies of the paper that they would keep and hand out to people and stuff like that. And there were people, you know, who you'd interview, for instance, Austin Wilhite, who's at Faith Lutheran, is director of worship music.
Yeah.
I interviewed him when he was in Young Stars.
Yeah.
You know, like 5th grade or 6th grade. And then when he went into the high school and was in all those plays, I interviewed him. And then when he went off to college. And then when he went into Faith Lutheran.
Right.
And now that he's involved with the Hutchinson Theater Company.
Yeah.
And the Hutchinson Concert Association. And so, yeah, Austin's been part of my life for a long time. And I've been part of his.
Yeah. That gives me goosebumps. I can even feel them on my head right now because you are part of the span of somebody's life. And you tell stories from cradle to grave.
Yeah, you do. You do, because you don't, you just do. I ran into another fellow at Riversong, and I was talking to him, and I interviewed he and his wife when they were in the process of adopting their daughter from Eastern Europe or Russia, I can't remember. And that story won a National Newspaper Award and a Minnesota Newspaper Association Award. So it was a good story, but it was fun because I saw her grow up, I saw her go off to college, and every time I see them, you know, it's always,
Yep.
yeah, so that's cool because you build connections with people.
And I would think, well, I have had the honor of being interviewed by you. You feel like I trust you because I'm entrusting you to tell part of my story. And everyone's story is so personal to them. It's ownership of that. And then they're allowing you the power
And
to write that story.
I take that trust seriously because I've had people who have called me after the interview and said, let's not use that part. And I always honor it, even though it might be really a significant moment or great to the interview, because I never know when I might need that person again, or they may need me, and I want to be able to always maintain a positive, relationship.
Right. Well, you get into the story, and then you're telling stories, and then you think afterwards, oh, cousin John might not be really happy with that if I shared that.
Yeah, I'm really careful about that, and I'm also very thoughtful about it.
Okay.
And if it's something where it could be touchy, I'll ask.
Okay.
And sometimes people are very open and like, yeah, I'm good with that. That's
Yeah.
important. Or, oh, did I really tell you that?
When did I say that in my verbal diarrhea to you as I'm telling you everything? Have you ever had a story that impacted you, like it was heavy, it was deep, it might have been sad or scary, and like it was just hard to have to write it?
I interviewed a fellow from Hutch who was at one of the was part of a group of soldiers who liberated a concentration camp after World War II. Or during World War II, I guess, toward the end. And it was, I'm also a World War II person, and so it was interesting to talk to him, but it also was very emotional to a point because of what they found, and I forget which, it wasn't one of the, like, Treblinka or Auschwitz, it was a smaller camp, but nevertheless, it still was a death camp. Mm-hmm. And then he had photos he took. Lots of photos. And I really felt strongly then, and I feel even more strongly now, that it's important that those people are remembered and acknowledged, because it should never happen again.
Right.
And so I picked out a few photos and wanted to run them. And Dick Crawford was editor then, and he changed the photos. He felt they were too...
too raw?
Yeah, yeah. And so we picked one that was fairly, for lack of a better word, vanilla. And, you know, it was okay because he didn't change the story, just the photos.
Right.
But photos to me were really impactful because they were real.
Right.
I mean, they weren't in a book. They weren't in a TV special. They were real because this man had been there as, you know, like a 20-year-old.
And took them.
Yes.
Yeah, because when you think about people who've gone through something like that, and when you, as you said, liberating a concentration camp, you're walking in as a soldier to help free people who have been through atrocities that we will never understand.
That's true. Absolutely.
And now he's sharing that with you, and you're trying to put onto words to describe that on a page.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's sort of a balancing act, because on one hand, you want to be truthful and you want to be respectful. On the other hand, it's a horrible story. Right. And there's no good way to tell it, because there's nothing good about it.
Right.
I mean, the good is the stories of the people who survived. But it's not a good story in the sense that it's, I mean, the happy ending is they lived, but so many millions didn't.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm bearing witness for them, for those silent voices. And so I was ticked that he didn't run the right photos, but what can you do?
Right.
So, but I did get the story, so that was good.
You got the story, and now there's the internet.
Yes.
You could rerun the story.
Yeah, that's true.
How about something that just, like, either was so funny or, like, so ludicrous? Like, is this even real? Did you have anything like that?
No, but our former editor, Stefan, did. He interviewed the gal who stuck her head in the tailpipe at Windstock. And his story went everywhere. That was a big story. I mean, that's like he was editor just a few years ago, so internet, all the stuff, people were calling him from networks. And so, yeah, I never had any story like that. I mean, I never, he was, you know, he was that much younger, and so was much more interested in sort of those quick catch stories.
Right. I'll just say that story keeps coming up in my world. It was Water Carnival week.
Oh, yes.
Last month, right? And we were still talking about that unfortunate incident.
Well, it was an astonishing story, because
it was, yeah.
Who would seriously do that? See? Yeah, see?
That's why I asked these questions, because I didn't even think about that as a story either. Anything that just continually surprises you about your reporting?
That people, you know, it's funny because people typically don't come up to me that much about stories. But my mom, they love my mom. We love Kay. We love that story. Oh, my mom's like, I know. So she basks in my glory.
Yeah, right.
But Yeah, most of the time, I sort of feel like no news is good news.
Yeah.
And so if nobody calls about it, I'm good with that.
Yep.
And, but often it's, because like, for instance, Josie Sankin, I did a story about Josie. And, she's just a wonderful musician. They won the Dancing for the Stars thing a couple years ago. And so, she keeps popping up and it's fun because I've met her. When she's playing somewhere, it's hi and it's just fun because she's such a great person and so talented.
Yes.
And just so grounded.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care where you run into her. She's not like fancy,
No.
She's just very approachable and very kind, and so she's cool. I like her.
I love that. You were talking about Stefan for a little bit and the difference in ages, generations, and now we're in this technology. Things have changed in the last 30 some years, from a magazine to a newspaper to online. Why don't you just talk a little bit about the changes in coverage in the industry over the last...
I can do that.
Pick a date.
When I worked at the Leader, we had, I think at the maximum, 11 reporters. And mine was entertainment and feature stories. That was my beat. And we had a city reporter, county reporter, a school reporter, all of these people. And then in like 2008, the industry started to really sort of beginning its descent, although it had been happening before that. And then we laid some people off, and then the paper got smaller, and our workload expanded. And then we had been owned by Red Wing Publishing, which had been a family-owned company. And they sold to M&G Media News, which is a big company which is known for buying newspapers, sucking all the money out of them and then dumping them. And so we, when they bought us, we didn't know how long we'd have, but, you just kind of go with the flow. And then when we were told we were closing like April 30th or something, it was kind of a shock because it's like, now what am I going to do? And I could retire though, so I could have done that. But, I just sort of hung out thinking, well, something will happen. And then Cherry Road Media, which is out of New Jersey, they showed up, and I quit one job on Friday and started a new job on Monday, which is really quite remarkable.
Remarkable.
But we also had me, Brent, and Colleen, our ad rep, and and I think we had one more person who isn't there now. And we had someone in Litchfield. Now there's just 3 of us. And so, what's happened is we used to cover everything, from the check passing photo to the ribbon cutting to the, opening night plays, whatever it might have been. City council meetings. Now, when people call me to cover something, first thing I say is, we typically don't have anyone because I'm very careful with my own time because I could work easily 24/7. But we ask people to submit photos, and for the most part, they want the coverage. They don't really care who does the coverage. So I haven't had any pushback from people who, when I asked them to take photos, because I said, you take the photos, send them to me, and then I'll call you and we can talk about it. And oftentimes they'll send me info, and we just touch base. So that's worked out really well. And I've been really happy about that because otherwise we wouldn't be covering it. And so we have the city and the county boards covered, and school board kind of. And then I'm typically doing still the entertainment, which we have a lot of in Hutch.
We do.
Which is a cool thing. And then feature stories, events.
Here's my next question for you, and possibly my last, just looking at the clock and the time, but how has technology changed how you cover stories?
Well, really because of the time, my time and how many stories I cover. I find it really difficult to take notes. like, so I really like to do phone interviews because I can tape them. And I do a lot of Q&As because they're quick. And I find that people really don't want to do interviews in terms of the time it takes. And so they send me some questions. And that's worked out really well because it's their voice. And it isn't me making a mistake and, something. So that's worked out well. Everything's digital. And in our company, we were actually a tech company before we added the newspaper division. They've been doing big city, school district type systems since the 80s. And so their motto is digital first. And so I would expect at some point in the future, no dates now, but that we would be strictly online. And our problem is we have an older readership that likes paper. And then we have younger readership, who don't really get interested until they buy a house or have kids, because then it's taxes and schools. And then they want to know what's going on. And but they're all, my niece Rebecca, who's 30 years old, I mean, it's all about her phone. If it's not on the phone, she's not going to read it. And so you're kind of in a tough spot there as you transition. And so we'll see what the future brings, but I expect to be digital first down the road.
This has been delightful as expected. Thank you.
Well, if you ever got a hole in your schedule, need someone, just
We'll
give me a
come
holler.
back and we'll tell some more stories,
Yes.
which we would love to hear. Thank you so much
Oh,
for
yeah.
your
Well,
time.
it was great fun to see you. And I caught up with Mary at Riverside. That's how we kind of...
Right. And she'd been on my list already. We'd already been in contact.
Yes, we
had
had
some
been,
scheduling.
and just
this
hadn't
is
worked out.
perfect.
So it was great. So then, of course, I scribble it on a sheet of paper, shove it in my purse, and then I'm trying to find the sheet of paper. And then I text Mary and say, what did we decide? so much for perfect record keeping.
No, it's all good. This is why we want to do this show. It's the Hutchinson Hive. It's what's buzzing in Hutchinson, and Kay certainly knows what is a buzz. So we will see you next month. Thanks for joining us. Until then, have a great month.